My name is David Courtney, and today we're going to be discussing the history of North Indian classical music. But we're not just going to discuss the history because it's full of dates and names and people that you can get in any book, you can get on the internet. We're just going to do a brief overview of this. But perhaps more importantly, we're going to discuss how to put the history of North Indian music into some type of perspective. And we're also going to acquaint ourselves with a very common problem when dealing with the history of music, and that is a kind of a temporal skew. That is a tendency for people to make things older than they actually are. So these are the things we're going to be looking at today. We can begin our discussion of North Indian music with the Samaveda. This is the normal place in which many historians will begin. The Samaveda is one of the ancient texts of the Hindus, and it goes back about 3,000 years. It is oftentimes considered that the Samaveda is one of the earliest songbooks to be, that we have, because in a sense it is a book of songs, of religious songs. And so it is, in a sense, a music book. So we can consider it one of the oldest musical books in the world. But obviously a lot of things have to go between 3,000 years ago and today. And probably the next major milepost in the history of North Indian classical music would be the Natya Shastra, which was a book written by Bharat Muni somewhere around the 2nd to 4th century BC. Now there is of course a lot of discussion as to whether Bharat Muni was one person or amalgamation. There's plenty of differing opinions as to exactly when it was written, but one thing we are absolutely certain of is that the Natya Shastra is the oldest book on stagecraft in existence in the world. The Natya Shastra itself was based upon an older work called the Natya Sutras, which unfortunately have survived. Anyway, in the Natya Shastra, Bharat Muni goes into tremendous detail concerning the form of stage, drama, music, and stagecraft in general. And it's very informative as to the music and art of the period. Now we have to go considerably further closer to the present before we get the next major milestone in Indian music. And that would be the Brihadeshi by Matang, which was in the 7th century AD. Now the Brihadeshi is very important for a number of reasons. For one reason why this is important is this is the first time that the word rag shows up in print. It's also very important because conceptually in the Brihadeshi we find a separation between dance and music, both instrumental and music, whereas in the earlier text by Bharat Muni it's combined. So we're seeing that dance and music have developed a certain maturity and have come of age and are now recognized as art forms existing in their own right. Now, unfortunately, there's a fairly large gap between the next major milestone in Indian music, and that would probably be in the 12th century when we get the Sangeeta Ratnakar by Sarangdev. Now, from the 12th century onwards, there is a plethora of musical texts and musical information. So we really have a pretty good sense of the development of Indian music from the 12th century onwards, although we have to admit that it's pretty sketchy before the 12th century. Some very major texts of note would of course be like the Gita Govinda by Jayadev in the 13th century. Or during the time of Akbar, in the 16th century, we have the Aini Akbari. And all of this gives us a pretty clear picture of the development of Indian music from that period. Now, in the case of North Indian music, from about the time of the 16th century onwards, mostly what we're seeing is the crystallization of certain musical styles and genres. We see the North Indian music completely becoming a separate entity from South Indian classical music. And we see that many changes in stylistic interpretations of music. Well, this is the history of North Indian music in a nutshell. And I strongly recommend you to seek other sources to get more details, more information, and things to make the picture a little clearer.